golf fans? It's your boy Gsluke here with our DFS value plays for this week's BMW Championship. Going to be covering some of the salary saving players you can get to, priced $8,000 and below on Draftkings. It'll give you some flexibility to perhaps add an extra stud or two to your lineups, and of course, get some much needed ownership leverage. This is by far the most important video every single week because picking the guys up top, $8,000 and above, it's pretty hard to go wrong. I mean, all of them going to have a lot of reasons to play them, but down low gets a little bit more dicey, particularly in this type of field that is just so top heavy. So really looking forward to it. Let's go ahead, cut the chit chat, and get on into it. All right, we've got our projections on the screen, and for our first value, we're going to go to Cameron Davis at $7,600. But before I hop into his stats specifically, just want to touch on my general rule of thumb this week, which with a brand new golf course, one that I've broken down extensively with my course breakdown, I expect this to be a driver-heavy golf course. It's relatively long, close to 7,500 yards, which is a lot longer than usual because it's a par 71, and on top of that, you're also dealing with a long rough, right? 4-inch Kentucky bluegrass, patches of fescue. There's also a lot of dog legs that can be taken out of play by some of the longer players. So on almost every single hole, there's going to be a distinct advantage for not only the players that are long off the tee, but also those that can keep it in the fairway and out of that gnarly rough. And Cameron Davis might not be elite with his accuracy, but he definitely checks off the box with his off the tee distance. So at $7,600, he's got that going for him, but it doesn't just stop there. He's been in quite a stretch of form over the last month. That's why he's made it into the top 70. And on top of that, putts his best by far historically on the bent grass surface. So just to give you an idea of the form, which is pretty decent. It's not outrageous for somebody at $7,600, but he's made a ton of cuts. A top 15 top 16, I should say, the last 3 weeks. 6th place at the Barracuda, finished 8th at the John Deere, and made the cut at the Travelers as well. So is in a great stretch of form here. And on top of that, the shots gain metrics also back that up. So if we go down here to 7,600, you can see he's gaining across all 4 categories, or I suppose around the green, it is just a slight negative. In fact, such a small negative that it's 0.00, but off the tee, gaining marginally, gaining a bunch on approach. The one thing I'll say off the tee is that he should be gaining a lot more with how long he is definitely a little bit inaccurate, but I think there's 2 ways to get it done here, right? You can be super long off the tee, take that bomb and gouge approach. If you're only going to have 120, 130 yards into greens, you could probably get away with that out of bluegrass rough. Whereas if you're a shorter hitter, right, you're a little bit more accurate, you can probably get away with being shorter as long as you're hitting the fairway, right? So I want you to do one of the 2 in elite ways. And Cameron Davis at least checks off the distance box. And on with the putter, he hasn't been all that sharp, but we would expect him to improve here a lot because of the surface, right? On bent grass, he has been just an absolute demon over the last 2 years, gaining over 1/3 of a stroke per round. We know he's going to bring it off the tee with the distance. The approach play has been by far his strong suit over the last month. I mean, this is just a great spot to unleash the Aussie. So I like him at 7,600. I do expect him to get quite a bit of attention with the 3 top 16 finishes in a row, a couple top 10 finishes over the last 5 to 6 starts, but I think it's well warranted. Next up, you've got Keith Mitchell, who I expect to be a little bit lower owned, but one thing I noticed last week is he was driving the ball beautifully, was hitting a lot more fairways than his peers, and one thing that Keith Mitchell has no doubts about when it comes to his game is his off-the-tee distance, is one of the longest players on the PGA Tour, and Quail Hollow is my #1 comp course for this week, a course where he was in contention 2 years ago when it was played down there in 2021. I was there in person, a great event to watch, but on top of that, he's a perfect course fit here. He's got the off-the-tee distance and accuracy, very reminiscent of somebody like a Rory McIlroy when he's firing on all cylinders, and he's going to have scoring clubs in hand a lot more often than the rest of the field. In fact, if you go to the course breakdown, I talk about some of the dog legs that are able to be chewed off. I mean, even on a par 5, you could have a pitching wedge in if you're one of these elite distance players. He's going to have a huge leg up on a lot of his peers, and particularly in the 7K range here, where you're not going to have that many elite level drivers. But one thing you'll notice about all 6 picks here is they're all elite level drivers, right? That's the one thing I'm hunkering down on this week, so it makes perfect sense. But on top of that, Keith Mitchell is a great, almost prolific bent grass putter. In fact, he's a top 10 putter on the field on bent grass, so 0.4 strokes gained per round. The shots gained of late haven't been nearly as impressive. He is losing on approach, but gaining off the tee like you'd expect. I mentioned that elite distance combination also has some accuracy. Has been pretty decent with the putter too. We just hope he turns it around with the irons. So, in the 7K range, he definitely has a flaw, as pretty much all the players up here do. The one flaw for Cam Davis, I would say, would be the ownership, right? He's going to be a little bit higher owned. So from a skill set perspective, he's a little bit more of a rock sure option. But Keith Mitchell, if he can turn around the iron play, has a legit winning upside here. Next up, we've got Taylor Pendrith, another bomber off the tee, right? Surprise, surprise here. But also coming in with outrageous form. So at 7,400, you can see he had the made cut last week, a top 15, a second place finish, an 11th and a 13th to round it out. His worst performance was last week, and it was a made cut. I'm willing to look past that when the shots gained metrics are just so good here, right? He's gaining off the tee 2/3 of a stroke per round, gaining over 1/3 of a stroke per round on approach. He's losing a little bit with the putter, a lot due to last week, specifically Saturday and Sunday at the St. Jude, where he just hemorrhaged strokes to the field. But on bent grass, kind of similar to a few of the other plays we've taken this week, he gains close to 2/3 of a stroke per round. In fact, he's a top 3 putter in the field when it comes to his shots gained stats on bent grass. So you'd like to, expect a bounce back there. The ball striking stats have been there for quite some time now. And with the recent form run that he's on, I would expect him to be popular here, perhaps, a little bit more popular than a Keith Mitchell at that same price tag, but it's well warranted, right? He's coming in with much steadier form. So if I'm going to play 35% of somebody, I'd much rather that be a Taylor Pendrith than a Keith Mitchell. And based on ownership, I can probably play 20 to 25% of Mitchell and get leverage. I'm going to have to be a little bit more aggressive with somebody like a Pendrith, but I'm willing to do so. He's got the recent form. He's got the metrics I'm looking for on bent grass, and checks that off the tee box emphatically. Next up, we've got Mito Pereira, another elite level driver at $7,100. He's played well on bent. He's also had quite a few poor performances on the surface. Played well over there in Tulsa, almost won the PGA Championship. Those were bent grass greens. He's also lost 3 to 4 strokes. So he's volatile on this surface specifically, but I'm willing to take that in large field GPPs, right? These are meant for the large field contest where you're trying to beat 20, 100,000 other entries, whatever the case may be. You're going to have to get unique. And perhaps this is when we start to see Mito a little bit lower owned than he should be, because of late he's been volatile, right? Has not been as rock solid as we saw to start the year. Made the cut last week, but wasn't that good. Missed the cut at the Open, missed the cut at the Scottish, missed the cut at the Travelers. So I'd expect him to be a lot lower owned this week than we've seen for quite some time. But the ball striking stats are still there. I mean, look at this. Gaining close to half a stroke per round off the tee. The approach play still gaining 3/4 of a stroke per round, and a lot of these missed cuts have been right on the number. It's been a lot due to blow up holes where he's gone out there, made double, triple bogeys, in fact, multiple double bogeys last week, and still was able to make the cut. So Mito at $7,100, he's got that upside, just has to put it together, right? Don't have that blow up hole. Don't have that set of 5 to 6 holes where you're shooting 3 to 4 over par and completely playing yourself out of the event, because when he's had his game, he's been outrageously good. And in fact, last week, I believe he shot 2 under his last 4 holes to make the cut, had to birdie number 18, which was the most difficult hole on the golf course around TPC Southwind, and hit an absolute dart to 3 feet there on Friday. So he's got the pedigree. And again, he's almost won a major championship at this point, and he's too cheap for this field. And I expect him to be relatively low owned. So really checks a lot of the boxes I'm looking for. I'm going to have no issues at all getting to Mito. Next up, we've got Sebastian Munoz. And, when we start to get into the 6K range, it's a lot smaller this week than what we're used to seeing on tour. A lot less options priced below $7,000. But Munoz, another off the tee specialist, hits it a long way. Maybe not as accurate as a few of the other players, but you're getting what you're paying for, right? He's $6,500 for a reason. But on top of that, he's got the approach play that we're looking for, gaining close to 1/3 of a stroke per round, 0.4 shots gained per round off the tee, and is gaining across all 4 categories. You wouldn't expect that many players in this field, particularly in this range, to be gaining across all 4 categories, but he's one of the few that is. You have Adam Hadwin, who is as well. Let's see, is there any other examples? You have Kurt Kitayama down there at $6,000. That is also gaining across all 4 categories. But the one thing to really note specifically about Munoz is it's the ball striking categories, right? He's gaining significantly both off the tee and on approach, which are by far the most important stats this week. And then when you put him on bent grass, he putts by far the best. Gains close to a third of a stroke per round. So even though the putting of late has been a little bit hit or miss, he tends to hit a lot more often on bent than he does on any other surface. So I like his upside this week. He's got the off the tee distance and accuracy from time to time that I'm looking for. A high birdie percentage player who in a no-cut field, even if he has a few blow-up holes, he could still make 20 to 25 birdies on the week and end up cracking the optimal lineup that way, particularly because he's only $6,500. So I really like his upside there. I expect him to definitely have a chance to go out there and crack an optimal. And now lastly, the last value we'll touch on is going to be Luke List at 6,000 even. He's the cheapest of anybody on the slate. I mean, you have Kitayama down there as well, who I mentioned was gaining across all 4 categories. Probably worth a few looks too. Don't want to give anything away there. Can't give away all the picks from the Patreon. But Luke List has not been playing that well of late. Let's just get that out there right now. But what has he still been able to do? Gain a ton off the tee, right? Close to 3/4 of a stroke per round. Okay, we expect that. He's one of the longest players in the world, let alone here on tour. Also one of the most accurate drivers, which Rory McIlroy, a lot of the guys up top that I'm playing check that same box, and he's gaining on approach, like you're used to seeing from Luke List. Now, what is he struggling with? The putter, like we're used to seeing from Luke List. But what is one thing we know about Listy? Is that he's more than capable of spiking. You're going to see it a few times a year where Luke List goes out there and, I should say more than a few times. You're going to see it like 10, 15 times a year where Luke List goes out there and is a neutral putter. Putts to right around, maybe within a stroke of neutral, and ends up finishing in the top 10 to 15. That'll be a solid week from Luke List when he's a neutral putter. 1 to 2 times a year, he's going to gain with the flat stick. And when that happens, he wins golf tournaments or he gets into contention. Second place of the Honda, the win at the Farmers Insurance Open. He has shown us over the last few years an ability to get to that ceiling performance that frankly, a lot of people in this range just haven't shown us, right? He's got the ball striking upside. But on top of that, I really like him at a driver-heavy golf course, which makes a lot of sense. You've seen him have a lot of success at Quail Hollow, another one of the comps that I'm using for this week. So not a surprise that he's making it into my pool here, particularly when he's only $6,000 and it's a no-cut event. It doesn't matter if Luke List has a set of blow-up holes, kind of similar to a Sebastian Munoz. We just need him to make 20 to 25 birdies, which is a lot, right? But he's $6,000. That would be more than enough to crack the optimal. And with his ball striking ability, he could just hit dart after dart. That's what you see from Luke List from time to time. There was an event 2-3 weeks ago where I was playing him. He ended up having a pretty decent week. Let's see. If we just look at the recent form, we'll be able to figure it out. Where he wasn't doing it with the putter. He was just hitting it to like 4 or 5 feet on almost every single hole. It was back here at the Travelers. He had a set of like 8 holes where he made 7 birdies in those 8 holes. And I believe the total made putts was like 30 feet. Or something like that. There was a few kick-ins, a few that were less than like 6 inches, that sort of thing. I think the longest putt he made in that streak was something like 12 feet. Something that was more than reasonable for pretty much any player in the field. He's capable of just making birdies with his ball striking alone, let alone if you get that, Farmers Insurance Open type of performance where he goes out there and gains with the flat stick and then it's game over. Like Luke List is almost unbeatable at that point. So $6,000, I think he's got a ton of upside. And you're betting on the putter, right? You need that putter to come around. You're hoping that he can get you a top 15 finish, something like that, if he can go out there and be a neutral in that category. But even if he loses to the field, at $6,000, we know he's got all 4 rounds guaranteed there. He still might, sniff the optimal lineup. All right, fellas, that is all I've got for the value picks this week. Before you hop on out of here, go ahead and smash that like button. It goes a long way with helping grow the channel. And also, go ahead and let me know who your favorite value on the board is. Just make sure they're priced $8,000 and below on DraftKings. And go ahead and give me a little bit of a nugget why you like them. But that's all I've got here. Best of luck with all of your lineups this week. We will have a prize picks video dropping a little bit later on tonight. So if you're looking for that type of content, it'll be out, right around 8-9 p.m. Eastern time. And then tomorrow we'll have our fades and sleepers for the BMW, as well as our DFS live stream at 7 p.m. Eastern time. We'll be touching on the weather, any live questions, some strategy talk. We'll make a few lineups together as well and just get you prepared for everything you need to know for this week. Looking forward to it, guys. Like I said, best of luck with all of your exposure here, and let's get this cash.